What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Before I get started on the video, just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you guys celebrate, and say thank you guys for being the best supporters on YouTube. This channel will never be near what it is without you guys. So I want to say that. We'll not probably have another video up until after the holidays. So I want to say thank you to all the support that you guys always show on the channel. Also, if you guys are interested, going to be having my second episode on my new podcast. I know a lot of you guys probably don't follow me or Mike Tynes on Twitter. We actually started a weekly podcast. Maybe it'll turn into something bigger where we talk New York Giants as well as broad NFL. It'll be centered around the Kevin Abrams discussion today. It's called Mike and Entertainah Talking Sports. It's on Apple and Spotify podcasts, so you can find it there if you guys want to check that out. We're going to talk it too. I'm not sure when it's going to be up on the platform, but the second episode should be up today. So hopefully some of you guys check that out if you like to hear us talk some New York Giants football. I know a lot of you guys in the past have requested me make a podcast. But in this video, we're going to talk about the two main topics that have been running rampant all over New York Giants Twitter. One, like I said, is Kevin Abrams. Lawrence Tynes came out with a tweet yesterday, and he was on his podcast where he talked about why he thinks Kevin Abrams should be the next GM for the New York Giants. I'll also pull up some quotes that came out from Jason La Canfora of CBS Sports, in which he talked about that he thinks that Kevin Abrams could be the favorite, or at least a very strong candidate, to land this New York Giants GM job. I'll give my full opinion on the matter. I think you guys know, based off my previous video, where I stand on the matter, but that does not mean anything. That I cannot prevent what the New York Giants are going to do, and I will at least try to see some sense in what if that's what they elect to do, even though that would definitely not be the route that I would take. I'll give my reasoning after pulling up the quotes why I think the New York Giants would consider bringing in Kevin Abrams. I'm also going to touch on a hot topic that's been all over Twitter. A couple of people have said that there was a tweet that came out that Adam Schefter said that the New York Giants are all in on Daniel Jones. Now, I don't know if that video clip came from this. He did say it came from Get Up. He did say it came from Adam Schefter. But yesterday he went on ESPN. He talked about Daniel Jones. I did not get that. I'm going to play the audio clip for you guys. It sounded to me like he made it sound like the New York Giants believe in Daniel Jones for next year, but the term all in never came out of his mouth. And he also left open the possibility that the New York Giants could potentially look from outside the organization at the quarterback position. I'm sure we'll get these answers as the offseason gets underway. If you ask me now what I think will happen, yes, I think Jones will be the starting quarterback going into next year, but they will have a much stronger backup. And Schefter kind of talks about his reasoning why he thinks that way as well throughout this audio clip. It's about 30 seconds. You can see the full video. It's a kind of a discussion between Louis Riddick and Adam Schefter on ESPN. It's on their YouTube page. It's about 3.5 minutes, but I'm going to play about a 30-second clip in which Adam Schefter talks about that the New York Giants, at least he thinks, feel they have their guy for next year at the quarterback position.
Schefter, where do things stand with Daniel Jones and the Giants right now?
Well, Dan, again, I think they still believe in Daniel Jones as their quarterback, and as we talked about with the Eagles, what are the options? Who can they get that would be better? Who can they get that would be better than Daniel Jones at this point in time? And right now, the plan is to bring Daniel Jones back. And again, who's making that decision for the Giants at the general manager spot? That's a question that I think everybody's wondering about moving forward here, because it looks like they're going to have a new GM after this season. So that becomes a question there. Who's making that decision? But Daniel Jones has done enough to be brought back for next season. I think that's their thinking right now, that he will be the guy, though that doesn't preclude them from looking around to seeing what the other options are.
Okay, so that was the bit of the clip that I wanted to play for you guys. That coming out from Adam Schefter, of course, a very credible insider who works for ESPN. Now, we did finish the statement with that does not preclude them from looking outside from outside the organization to potentially bring somebody else in, but he did basically say that the Giants feel that they have their guy. Assuming he's only talking about the 2022 season. I don't get all-in vibes. I don't get long-term vibes. We'll see. A major question is, will they extend him on the fifth-year option before the year starts? I would hope not. If not, only for the simple reason of his injury history. The guy's now missed 10 games throughout his first 3 years. I don't think they will. I think in the end, due to some of the things that he also touched on at the beginning of that quote, the Giants probably, unless a really good deal comes about for a guy like Russell Wilson that is much lower than what people expect the asking price to be, I think Jones will be back, but I think they will have a much stronger backup to compete with Jones. The main reason being, kind of like he hinted at, what's the better option in the draft? There is not a quarterback, according to most experts, that really makes people's eyes pop out of their head. And I'll do a lot more research on those quarterbacks during the offseason because it's at least a realistic possibility that they could draft one of these guys. But I've watched a little bit of Kenny Pickett. I've watched a little bit of Malik Willis and Matt Corral. Corral definitely has a strong arm, but he also has an incredible offensive line at Ole Miss. And like I said, nobody is touting these guys to be the next great thing. And I think we could all agree that the New York Giants do not have an ideal circumstance for a quarterback to be successful. I think Schefter's kind of hinting at that in the beginning of that quote. So according to him, he expects, at least as of now, Daniel Jones to be back as the quarterback next year. Now, we don't even know the health situation for Jones with his neck. We'll wait to get further details about that. We know he's out for the rest of the year. But my guess would be today that they will have a much stronger backup, maybe a guy similar to a guy like Tyrod Taylor, to come in and at least push Daniel Jones. And if Jones gets hurt or is not getting the job done, he will be replaced. But after that, unless there's significant improvement with the offense, I would expect the Giants to look towards the draft to bring in a quarterback. Next thing we're going to talk about is the second part of this video, and I think the more important part, that being Kevin Abrams. I made a video yesterday, I think it was, or 2 days ago, talking about the GM position and why I think the New York Giants have got to go from outside the organization. John Mara, since he's been the owner for the most part, has always looked for comfort. Guys he's got familiarity with. Did it with Gettleman, did it with Reese. It's time to think outside the box. I want to say that before I get into these quotes, I would not be a fan of going forward with Kevin Abrams, but I'll try to give some reasoning as to why I think the Giants would do this if they do, in fact, elect to do it. This coming out from Lawrence Tynes, of course, the former kicker for the New York Giants, has a podcast, Blue Rush. I think he does it with one of the writers from the New York Post, if I'm not mistaken, but this coming out from Tynes. Kevin Abrams should be the new Giants GM in 2022. Can't play the guilty by association card either. He has not had any say in personnel since Dave Gettleman got here. Those of you who say he has do not know what you were talking about. Hashtag Together Blue. First thing I'll say is he has a lot more. He played for the Giants, so I would say he should know what he's talking about. He should have some ties from within inside the New York Giants organization. He's basically saying he's had no say whatsoever on what has happened with the New York Giants. Abrams has been there for the last 20 years or so with the football team, and over the last 10 or 11 years of complete failure. The stigma on Kevin Abrams has been that he's been basically a capologist and a guy that's just sat there by a lot of people. But Kevin Abrams, and we're going to get into some of the quotes that he had to say, said that was the furthest thing from the truth earlier in this year, and in fact did have some say in terms of the responsibilities of the guy I guess scouting these players and which players they're looking to bring in. But I'll pull up those quotes and show you exactly what Kevin Abrams said earlier in the season. My thinking cap comes on when I start to see some of these things about Kevin Abrams. If you remember at the beginning of the year, Kevin Abrams was actually being shown to the press. He was doing joint interviews with Dave Gettleman, and it makes me think back to that and say to myself, was this the plan all along? Did the New York Giants always think that Kevin Abrams was going to be the successor, the guy that took over for Dave Gettleman at year's end, and knew that Gettleman was going to retire before the year even started, and they were trying to promote him to the press as a guy that is a lot more than a capologist? But that's just a theory, and we'll see what happens at year's end. This then coming out here from Tynes, wanted to pull up a couple more quotes from the podcast. Got this off GiantsWire.com. I would like to see Kevin Abrams be named the general manager of the New York Giants, Tynes said. I say that because he's been here for a long time. To me, that's a deterrent. He should have been hired last cycle before Gettleman. That may be the case, but he wasn't. And I think we would have avoided this mess that we're in. We'll never know, and maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. You know, he's got his opinion, I've got mine. I am not a fan of hiring Kevin Abrams to be the New York Giants general manager. To me, it's more of the same, and it's more of John Mara not thinking outside the box and thinking from outside the organization. The biggest reason why they would do this, in my opinion, is because of Daniel Jones and because of Joe Judge. This then further coming out as well. But I think he deserves a shot to run this team. And here's how I'll say it. If we're keeping Judge, you give Abrams 1 year, and if it doesn't work out, you fire everyone next year. I know that what we want, that's not what we want to keep doing. I would love to see Kevin Abrams get a shot at running the team. Why does Tynes want to see Abrams run the show? I think he's different. I know him personally. Tynes said, I think he's different than some of these guys that have had the reins before. Well, here's what I'll say to that quote. If you're only giving it a 1 year, like, stopgap GM, that's not really giving Kevin Abrams a shot to begin with. To me, that's basically just keeping Dave Gettleman. Like, if you're going to do that, the way I look at it, just keep Dave Gettleman. You're basically just making Joe Judge the decision maker at that point, or at least have as much responsibility with the decision making that he already had. You're staying in house. You're doing it for stability. You're doing it to try to push forward rather than do a rebuild. That would be the reasoning for it. And you fear that if you bring in an outside GM, you're not going to be able to get qualified candidates to want to take this job if you keep Joe Judge. Now, if they keep Joe Judge, this may be the most logical answer. Give it a year and then blow it up. But that's not giving Kevin Abrams a chance. And in my opinion, it is not the best decision to do that. Reason being, this is one of the most important drafts the New York Giants have had in years, and I know a lot of people say that all the time. Giants have 2 picks from inside the top 6 right now. They have 5 picks inside the top 85, and they have very limited cap space to begin with. I want the best possible decision maker to be making those decisions. That's at least my perspective. Now, the devil's advocate to that conversation, some people may say, well, the drafts have been pretty good since Joe Judge has gotten here, to which I would say we can't really truly evaluate these drafts quite yet. After the 2018 draft, people were saying the same thing after a year or two. Oh, Lorenzo Carter's shown promise. Oh, B.J. Hill's shown promise. Oh, Will Hernandez is showing progress. And then as it got further along, those drafts did not look nearly as good. They said the same thing about Saquon Barkley. So we don't know what these players are going to look like 2-3 years down the road. Am I encouraged with Andrew Thomas? Absolutely. But to me, that was a no-brainer pick. It was number 4 overall, and he was a top-tier tackle. So to me, they had to take a tackle there, and he's worked out, but it's not like it was an incredible pick. Yeah, Xavier McKinney looks really good. He kind of fell in the New York Giants' lap. Reports actually came out, if I remember, that Gettleman actually wanted to stay and keep McKinney, while Judge was thinking about trading back, but I could be wrong on that. But regardless, it's not like these draft classes have been slam dunk home runs. We don't know that to be the case quite yet. And for me, I want to think outside the organization at this point. I think continuing to do the same thing over and over again and leaving one foot in, taking one foot out, it does not work for me. And if the Giants think that the fan base is this naive, that firing Gettleman and keeping Abrams is anything different, he's got another thing coming. Abrams has been a part of this front office for the last 15 years, and these are words that came out of Kevin Abrams' mouth. First, actually, I'm going to pull up what Confor said, then we're going to get the quotes from Abrams himself. Kevin Abrams, the team's assistant GM, who's been the assistant GM there for a while, will be a strong contender to succeed Gettleman. Jason Confor of CBS Sports notes, while the Giants' past hires would not paint an Abrams rise as a big surprise, the team continuing business as usual after the 5 seasons would be a controversial strategy. A Giants staffer since 1999, so he's been there since 99. Abrams has established a versatile skill set. Now, when he first came on, he was a capologist. That was his skill set. There it is. The Giants hired him as a cap analyst early during Ernie Accorsi's GM stay. Abrams has since been the team's assistant GM for the past 20 years. So, okay, so he's had some say. Working under Accorsi, Jerry Reese, and Gettleman. The Giants interviewed Abrams for the job in 2017, but opted to go with Gettleman, who was a longtime Giants staffer before taking over as the Panthers GM in 2013. Reason being, maybe potentially because he had prior GM experience, maybe because he was willing to stick with Eli and maybe Abrams wasn't. We'll never get the answer to that. Ownership views Abrams as a very worthy in-house option per La Canfora. The Giants' 3 previous GMs have worked with the team before being tabbed the lead for the front office. And you've seen how that's worked out over the last 10 or 11 years. This then is coming out a quote from Kevin Abrams talking about his responsibility. Got this off Giants Wire. It was like a month or 2 before the year started. During those interviews in which I talked about when him and Gettleman rather were kind of doing joint interviews talking to the public. The truth is, for the last 15 years, Matt Harris, Martin Mayhew, and Triggs have been our cap guys more so than I have. So he hasn't been doing that for 15 years. I might be over the shoulder a little bit or might have some direction, Abrams said. Ultimately, I suppose the buck rests with me and then Ernie Accorsi, Jerry Reese, and Dave Gettleman, whoever the GM is, but we've empowered other people to really manage our day-to-day salary cap and our contract structures, to some extent, our negotiation positions. Although, that's sort of when myself and our personnel people and the GMs will get more involved, but I haven't really been our cap guy in a while. He then went on to talk about his responsibilities. My involvement is whatever it is that I'm asked to contribute, Abrams said. I just follow the lead of my bosses. If Dave says go look at the quarterbacks, I go look at the quarterbacks. If John Mara asked me to sit on coaching interviews, then I am going to sit on coaching interviews and contribute the best that I can. So he's either done absolutely nothing, which I refuse to believe, or he has had some say in what has happened over the last 20 years with this New York Giants football team. Has he had the final say? No, but he's at least been an advisor and a guy that's been a part of this debacle for the last 10 or 11 years. So to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to bring him in. This team has been failing. We've been the worst organization in all of football outside of the New York Jets over the last 10 years. The worst. The worst. Go back and look at it. The Detroit Lions, I think, have had 3 winning seasons. We've had 1. We've been horrific, and he's been the assistant GM over that tenure. If you had a business and the business was failing, would you look to promote somebody from within? Because I wouldn't. The only reason this makes any sense whatsoever, and the only reason that the New York Giants, at least in my opinion, would do this is because they want to stick with Judge, and they know not a lot of GM candidates are going to want to take this job if Judge is still the head coach, not to mention their cap situation and the fact that they may not feel that they want to move on from Daniel Jones going into next year, at least partially due to the fact that they feel it's a weaker quarterback draft class, and they wouldn't be willing to give an outside GM free reign, which I suppose is understandable, and I understand people that think that this is more logical because they don't want to force a quarterback pick, but at the end of the day, with as many picks as we have early, if the New York Giants screw up this draft, you're only making it worse down the line. That's a calling card right now for a future GM. Now, maybe the New York Giants will trade down in this draft to give themselves more of an opportunity, but then you have to ask yourself, will Joe Judge be for that? You're talking about a guy that has been building for the last 2 years. He cannot continue to sell ownership and the fan base that he's continuing to rebuild a year after you spent like a lunatic in free agency. Yes, there's been some injuries, but injuries will not be an acceptable excuse 2 years in a row. If the New York Giants go on to win 5 or 6 games next year, he will be without a job. He knows the pressure will be on, so Joe Judge probably will not be thinking about anything but the immediate future, and that, of course, is 2022 next year. I can't see the New York Giants sticking with Judge if the team wins another 5 games the following year. Do I think Judge will be back? Yes. Do I think Kevin Abrams could be the GM? Yes. Do I think it's the right decision? No. But as a fan, will I give him an opportunity? I have no choice. As I've said, when people have asked me, I'm going to go in with an open mind. But for me, I will not have as long of a leash on a hire like Kevin Abrams as I would an outside GM for the simple reason I feel Abrams is just an extension of Dave Gettleman. I don't see much of a change. Now, what I will say from a positive standpoint, not that there's much positivity to this, if they do go this route, I may prefer this to hiring, say, a guy that had previously worked with Joe Judge from the New England Patriots. Because if you do that, you probably have to commit at least 2, if not 3 years to that new GM coming in. If you hire Abrams, I think it gives you a stronger possibility if things fail, you could completely blow it up after the 2022 season. But for me, what I worry about is this is doing something similar to what we did in 2018 and not starting the rebuild and, doing what we should and waiting another year and only making it worse down the line. Obviously, I hope it all works out, and I fully understand that you can't do a whole rebuild with all the players that we have under contract, with all the money we spent this past offseason. But I want a new direction, and I think a lot of New York Giants fans do as well. We'll see what happens at year's end. But in the end, as I've said all along, I think Judge is going to stay on, and if not Abrams, somebody similar to Abrams probably will be appointed to be the GM because that's the Mara way. I'm used to that, and until he proves otherwise, that is what I'm going to continue to believe will happen at season's end. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.